Many believe they must seek the veil to cross it. These accounts suggest that sometimes the crossing finds you, waiting silently along roads or within the very air of certain places, long before you ever choose to arrive. Welcome to the Charon Files. The stories you are about to hear are testimonies from living witnesses of what moves beyond understanding, of what refuses to be explained. Each of them stood at the edge of what is known and looked into what lies beyond it. My name is Charon, Ferryman of the Dead, the one who waits at that edge. What follows is what they brought back. May they prepare you for your own future encounters.
I've been fascinated by ghosts and the paranormal for as long as I can remember. I'm 22 now, and despite watching countless videos and reading stories over the years, I'd always assumed Ouija boards didn't actually work. I thought most of what you see online was either fake or exaggerated for views. One day, my fiancée and I were sitting around with nothing to do, and I randomly suggested trying a Ouija board. She told me she'd used one when she was younger and claimed it had actually worked. I was skeptical and honestly thought she was just trying to wind me up. Since we didn't have a real Ouija board, we printed one out, taped it to a cardboard box, and even made a cardboard planchette using a template we found online. My fiancée was adamant that we weren't going to use it at her grandparents' house where she lives. She said she didn't want to risk attracting anything to the house. I remember smirking because I still didn't believe any of it was real. Instead, we decided to drive to an old monastery in her town. The monastery dates back to the 12th century and was even bombed during the war, so we thought it would be an interesting place to try. We spent around 20 to 30 minutes attempting to contact a spirit, but absolutely nothing happened. Although I'd expected that outcome, I have to admit I was a little disappointed because part of me really wanted to experience something. We eventually gave up and went for a drive. As we were driving through the countryside, I spotted a small church with a graveyard in the middle of nowhere and suggested we give it one final try. I parked just outside the graveyard, and we set the board up again. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the planchette slowly began to move. My first thought was that my fiancée was pushing it to scare me. I asked her several times if she was moving it, and every time she insisted she wasn't. I still wasn't convinced, but I started paying close attention to her finger and noticed it was barely touching the planchette. That's when I started feeling genuinely unsettled. We began asking simple questions. Is there a spirit here that would like to speak to us? The planchette slowly moved to yes. We asked for the spirit's name, but it drifted between random letters that didn't spell anything. We tried asking again, and the same thing happened. Next, we asked if the spirit was a boy. It moved to yes. We asked how old he was. The planchette moved to the number 1, then moved above it before returning to 1 again. We asked, "Are you 11 years old?" It slowly moved to yes. Then I asked what, looking back, was probably a stupid question. How did you die? The planchette slowly spelled out, F-I-R-E. At this point, I was seriously creeped out. We tried several more times to get the boy's name, but it continued moving to random letters that made no sense. Eventually, I asked, "Do you not want us to know your name?" It moved to yes. After that, the planchette didn't move again, despite us trying for another 5 or 10 minutes. Even then, I was determined to find a logical explanation. I got out of the car and started walking through the graveyard to see if I could find the grave of an 11-year-old boy. My fiancée thought it was a bit disrespectful, so instead she searched online to see if there was a record of the people buried there. There was, and among the records was an 11-year-old boy. I still tried to convince myself it was just an incredible coincidence. Then, as we got back into the car, I started feeling strange. The only way I can describe it is that I felt completely zoned out. I wasn't scared exactly, I just felt oddly disconnected. Something then crossed my mind. I asked my fiancée to search for the boy's name along with the town where he died. She gasped. She turned her phone towards me, showing me an old newspaper article. According to the article, in 1947, 2 boys had been playing with matches. One of them threw a lit match into the petrol tank of an abandoned car, not realizing there was still petrol inside. The car ignited, and both boys suffered severe burns. Tragically, they died the following morning. I was speechless. At that moment, I knew my fiancée couldn't have been playing a prank on me. I was the one driving around, I was the one who randomly spotted the church, and I was the one who suggested stopping there. She didn't even know the graveyard existed, let alone the story of one of the children buried there. We drove home almost entirely in silence, both trying to process what had just happened. To this day, I still don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying everyone has to believe in Ouija boards or the paranormal. There may well be another explanation that I can't account for. But after that night, I can honestly say I'm no longer as skeptical as I once was. Whether it was coincidence, psychology, or something none of us can explain, it's an experience I'll never forget.
These events happened in one day, towards the beginning of June 2020, northeastern Minnesota. My friends and I had planned a day of exploring along the north shore of Lake Superior. Around 2 p.m., my friend, let's call him E, left his house to pick up our other friend, C, then me. There is a weird five-way intersection in our town, and as he drove through, E saw a man standing on the side of the road who seemed out of place. The man was wearing a clean black suit, red tie, dark sunglasses, and had a brown briefcase or leather bag in one hand. He was white, had prominent smile lines, and a long-ish blonde Beatles-style haircut. When E drove by, the man waved one hand, in a way E described as someone hailing a taxi. Not thinking much of it, E kept driving, and for a 2-mile stretch, no cars passed him in the same direction, and he hit all green lights. When he got to the next large intersection about 2 miles away, he saw the same man, and the man did an identical wave. Later that night was when we measured it out to be 2 miles and a 3-minute drive from the five-way intersection. To walk that would take at least 20 minutes. E thought it was strange, but ended up thinking it was a weird coincidence, or some people playing a prank. He picked up C and I up and told us what happened, but we all forgot about it quickly and had a fun day. E dropped us off back at our separate homes around 8:30 p.m., and the sun was low in the sky by the time he began to head home from C's house around 9 p.m. As E drove to the same intersection as the second sighting, on the diagonal corner in front of a telephone pole was standing the same man wearing the same thing. This was the third time E had seen this dude. Thinking fast, he rolled down his window and took a picture of the man. The light had turned red, so he had a little time. E then asked the man, "Hey, do you need something? Why did you wave at me?" Then with a straight face and even tone, all the guy said was, "The same reason you took a picture of me." As he was trying to wrap his head around what the fuck that meant, the light had turned green and cars were honking behind him, so he kept driving and got home. As soon as E got into his house, he checked his phone to see the picture of the man, and he said his heart just sank. He immediately called C and I and sent us the picture before picking us up again to try to figure out what was going on. So this picture is honestly one of the craziest pieces of evidence for something like this that I have seen in person. At first glance, it just looks like an empty picture of the sidewalk, telephone pole, and building behind it. No person standing there, just empty. But if you look closer and zoom in, you can clearly see a human-sized and shaped transparent blur standing on the sidewalk directly in front of the telephone pole. Clear as day, no editing done. The rest of the picture is easily visible, and it is the only spot of the image that looks like that. You can see the outline of a person, and the shapes directly behind it are distorted, but all the colors of the background are there. The time from when the picture was taken to when E picked us up again was less than an hour. We then went back to the spot, looked around, measured some time and distances, and took pictures at the same spot to see the comparison between the blur in one picture and someone actually standing there in another. We sat in the car talking about this and couldn't come up with a solid explanation of what it was that E had interacted with. E thought government, C thought ghost, and I thought MIB, or aliens. We haven't told too many people because of how crazy this sounds. Some things that stood out. The man wasn't dressed for the 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit weather that day, still wearing his sunglasses around sundown. He was seen twice, 2 miles apart, within 3 minutes. He was never seen moving, always standing in one spot. During the third sighting, E had seen the man, taken a picture of him, talked to him, and the man acknowledged E taking the picture. A picture was taken of the man, and he knew it but was gone from the picture immediately after. What was with the weird cryptic response he gave to E's question? Why did E see him so many times? Why would the man wave and acknowledge E if he didn't want to be seen or recorded? We have all kept a lookout and haven't seen the man since that day. I tried to give as many details as I could remember.
It started 7 or 8 years ago. I woke up in the middle of the night. Something was different. I was awake but could not move any part of my body. Tried to move my fingers, my arms, my legs without success. I felt like someone was watching me from the corner of my room. I could sense evil eyes. The darkness was getting closer and closer. I could feel the cold sweat running down my neck. I put every atom in my body to try and move, and when I did, it was so violent that I jumped from my bed. The room was empty. The corner that seemed dark was lit from the moon. Walked around, smoked a cigarette, and 1 hour later was able to sleep again. After a couple of days, the same thing happened. Somehow managed to move a finger and it was over. After 10 minutes, as I was about to fall asleep again, the same thing. But this time I was laying on my back, and the monster was on top of me. Later I saw the same description of it from many others, the old hag. It had black eyes, pale skin, and gray hair. It felt like it stuck its claws in my chest and was ripping my skin and bones. I have never been so afraid in my life. I woke up screaming and did not fall asleep all night. Over time, the attacks became more frequent, a few times a week, and when they did happen, it was not only once but 5 or 6 times during a night. It happened when I was sleeping with a girl. When I woke up, my hand swung so hard that I almost broke her nose. Looked my symptoms online and saw that it is sleep paralysis. Tried many suggestions on how to overcome it, but nothing worked. The only thing that worked for me was either sleeping during the day, I never had that experience while it was light outside, or going to bed drunk. It messed with my life for a full year. Lost a good job due to my sleeping patterns and my drinking. One night after a bad day, it happened again. This time I was fed up and told myself, "Buddy, go to sleep. This is not real. There is no one else in the room. Just fall asleep again." And when I did, the most amazing thing happened. I was dreaming but was fully aware that it is a dream. I had some control of what happened next in the dream. The feeling was great. I was lucid dreaming. The next time I had a sleep paralysis attack, I tried the same thing. The dream was more vivid, and I had more control over it. Wow, I loved the feeling whatever I wanted appeared in front of me, and whatever story I could think of happened in the dream. Over time, I managed 9 out of 10 times to turn the paralysis into a lucid dream. After a while, the episodes become less frequent, once a month, then once every few months. To be honest, I miss the lucid dreams, but the things that I had to go through to have them are not worth it. So if you think that you want to experience sleep paralysis, trust me, you do not. Sweet dreams.
The boundaries between worlds are not always abstract. Sometimes they are as tangible as a graveyard's fence, a stretch of asphalt, or the very threshold of consciousness, quietly asserting their own potent, localized will. The names of the witnesses have been changed to maintain anonymity. If what you have heard tonight mirrors something you have experienced, leave your story in a comment below and we will include it in a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe. You wouldn't want to miss